Stafford live.
Yes, we are live.
We're live. Okay. All right. Great. All right. So let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Really pleased to kick off this hearing of the Joint Committee on Fair Practices and State Personnel Oversight. And myself and Chair Attar are pleased to be here with some of our other committee members as well. We have before us two um, uh, topics on the agenda, one pertaining to employee relations and discrimination with regards to the Department of State Police, and the other one with regards to employment practices, and we have the Department of Budget Management with us. So I know we have a busy agenda, a lot going on with folks, so why don't we go ahead and jump right in. I'll turn it over to my House colleague, Delegate Attar, for any opening remarks.
Thank you, Chair Lamb. Good morning, everyone. I'll echo the comments of Chair Lamb, and I just want to thank you for joining us this morning, and it's nice to see everybody. It looks like we'll be beginning with Colonel Butler, Superintendent Butler. Yes, you're on here. I'll let you go ahead and begin.
Good morning, all. I'm going to go ahead and share my PowerPoint presentation with you at this juncture. Okay. Share. Okay, can everyone see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, I see nods in the affirmative. Okay, good morning. For those of you who may not know me, I am Colonel Roland L. Butler, Jr. I am the Superintendent of the Maryland Department of State Police. Since Governor appointed me as Superintendent in February of 2023, I, along with members of my leadership team, have worked intensely to improve the relationships and improve practices within the Maryland Department of State Police. We're certainly committed to transparency and accountability in order to improve and strengthen this organization. Today, I will share with you some of our successes and our commitment to employee well-being and recent changes we've made within the department. I'll move to slide number 2. Okay. Operationally, it's been a truly busy year for the Maryland Department of State Police. Central to much of the work earlier this year was our response to the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapse. From our aviation command to our dive team to our civilian staff, all members of the Unified Command navigating challenges of this tragic event tested us in many different ways. This incident proved the incredible dedication of all our personnel and the resilience of all our employees. Not only were we able to navigate this event, we were able to keep the department moving 24/7, 365, providing services to citizens across the state and those that traverse our state. Upon my appointment as superintendent, I recruited Mr. Reginald A. Lawson to the MDSP leadership team. Mr. Lawson currently serves as a senior advisor to state and local law enforcement partnerships with a focus on employee relations and our workforce culture. In November of last year, we started a brand new program called Performance Perspectives Program, better known as P3, to proactively seek opportunities and improve our programs and practices within our department and focus on frontline personnel, both sworn and civilian. Our objective from day one was to gain a better understanding of the challenges our staff face and also what's going on in workplace environments so that our employees know that they're valued and we truly care about their well-being. Earlier this year, I reinstated the Superintendent's Diversity Roundtable, which consists of a group of 20 civilian and sworn staff members who come from very diverse backgrounds. This group gives our employees the platform to listen, learn, and address concerns before they become an issue. Feedback gained within this forum allows us to influence our training programs and policies to foster a more inclusive environment centered on equity, understanding, and relationship building. The MDSP Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, better known as ODI, is responsible for many tasks, including the responsibility for conducting EEO investigations, coordinating mediation between employees, outreach of personnel, and various site visits and training, and managing our DEI workforce assessment program. The ODI team is actively involved within MDSP and provides open communication channels to support all of our employees. We're proud to report that ODI's most recent new hire will be responsible for the intake process and processing of all complaints and concerns forwarded to that office will begin working this Wednesday. The department is also in the process of hiring a director for ODEI. Currently, we have the assistant director acting in the director's capacity. ODI is committed to creating and maintaining the work environment, and especially a work environment that reflects positively upon the department and society. We look at diversity, equity, inclusiveness, and belonging so that MSP can be successful and also responsive to the needs of not only the citizens, but internally to each and every employee we have, both sworn and civilian. ODEI currently, I'm dealing with a little bit of lag here on one of my systems. My apologies. Okay. ODEI currently has 28 cases for the calendar year of 2024. These cases vary from EEO-related complaints to mediation requests, to just simply inquiries for information and better understanding of what's going on within the workplace. Employees may file directly with EEO, with ODEI, or an outside agency, which DEI will respond promptly. The EEO case types charts outline the cases and issues that we've received complaints about, keeping in mind that more than one issue can be selected within a complaint. All 28 dispositions are listed on the right-hand side, with only 3 cases that are currently still open. ODI works diligently and efficiently to address concerns and recommend appropriate resolutions to the employees. MSP ODI is dedicated to successful implementation of phase 2 of the workforce assessment program. Our goal is obtaining a much higher participation rate and more feedback from our personnel in the future. Qualified vendors are currently being evaluated by our procurement staff. I think if you recall the last one, I think we only had 44 people participate. As you will see later on in the presentation, I think there's a lot more to be gained and gleaned from the input of the employees, and we found that through another survey. Here. In order to expand MDSP's leadership, EEO knowledge, we had the opportunity to reach out to the US EEOC for outreach and education training. And the training was received very, very well within the department, so much so that we had over 200 managers, supervisors, and senior leadership participate in this training program. The training focused on preventing discrimination, harassment, retaliation in the workplace, and feedback from taking the class was absolutely overwhelming, and it was overwhelmingly positive. There was so much that people didn't know about things, and we provided a forum for them to ask any question, any type of scenario they could think of, and it really made us a better organization overall. As you may know, the Moore-Miller administration launched the first ever statewide workplace culture survey back in January of 2024 in order to get a better understanding of how employees are thriving and where more work actually needs to be done to make us successful. The survey was then categorized the results in the different core values and categories by agencies. MSP is proud to share that our participation was much higher than the state's average, and that our top 3 performing categories also resulted in higher scores than the actual state average, as you can see on your slide. This makes MDSP stand out, as 2 of our 3 core values, integrity and service, were top performing categories. After results of the survey were released, the MDSP submitted our culture improvement plan to the Department of Budget and Management on September 1st. And it was released from to all the state agencies, so everybody could take a look at that and see what we're doing. As outlined on the slide, our focus areas support our commitment to professional growth and development and the advancement of our personnel while obtaining their feedback through continued diversity roundtable meetings. Having that information come back is super critical so we understand where they're going. One of the things that we got back from this is what you see on your screen now, the specialized unit policy. For some time, MDSP has received feedback internally and externally regarding the selection of specialized units. To address this challenge, MDSP implemented the improved specialized unit policy in June of 2024. This revamped policy is based on best practices, including recent research from the National Policing Institute. One significant change to this policy includes the addition of a specialized unit Selection Review Committee. With our responsibility to affirm fairness, consistency, and compliance with the policy, this committee consists of the HRD director, the ODEI staff, and personnel command major. This is one of the many changes we've made with this policy to give everybody a fair opportunity to move forward and advance and professionally develop. I'll keep in mind that that is a living document. Obviously, we're going to move forward and assess that as we go to make sure we're still satisfying those benchmarks that were identified by our personnel. Next slide, as we move over to the Office of the State Fire Marshal. For those that didn't know, and many do not know, the Office of the State Fire Marshal is an agency within the Maryland Department of State Police. It recently celebrated its 130th anniversary. MDSP is proud to share that the State Fire Marshal's first non-lateral deputy in over 3.5 years was just recently appointed. I'm also proud to report she is the first African-American female in the agency's history to be appointed as Deputy State Fire Marshal. For the first time in the history of the Office of the State Fire Marshal, the Office of the State Fire Marshal is being managed as a unit within MDSP versus being an independent agency. While that may not seem much, bringing them into the fold and having them understand what we do, how we do, and also looking at what they do allows us to develop best practices to ensure that both of our entities are moving forward in a positive direction for all the employees, both sworn and civilian. During 2024, the Office of the State Fire Marshal has been certainly working hard to become more efficient. Working with members of MDSP's senior command staffs, the Office of the State Fire Marshal has seen an increase in workforce confidence and also formalization of administrative and managerial processes. Something that you just heard about recently in the media, the Department of Justice reviewed MSP's hiring policies, and they expressed some concerns, and we entered into a consent decree. During this process, the DOJ implicitly acknowledged that MDSP's full cooperation and transparency relayed during the investigation was super critical. And also, as a result of their findings, it was learned that MDSP's fitness testing and witness tests, although we were not intentionally discriminating against anyone, it did result in some people not being afforded the opportunity to advance and go through the actual hiring process. The MDSP is not the first agency to address this issue or have to face this issue. Others include the South Bend Police Department in Indiana, Baltimore County Police, and the Pennsylvania State Police. Each have faced similar challenges, and I think each are working hard to improve their processes and make it fair for everyone. The MDSP is committed to working with the Department of Justice to resolve this matter in a timely fashion. The advantage is that MDSP will soon obtain testing that is beyond reproach in coordination with the DOJ. I think for the first time in the history of many state police agencies, we're going to solicit an outside vendor to develop a test specifically for the state police. What that will mean, they will do a job task analysis and look at what troopers actually do on a day-to-day basis and develop a testing process based upon that to include both a written test and a physical test. It's important to note that during the DOJ's review and analysis of the Maryland State Police promotional process, they took a good hard look at that, and that portion of the investigation was actually closed in March 2023 with no finding against the department. Additionally, as stated, MDSP is fully committed. We're looking at some serious moves to enhance what we do and how we do it. Recently, we will still be using the same test that we used. However, we have removed the timelines for push-ups, sit-ups, and also the run. A new vendor will be chosen, as I said, and we're going to design a test that's more inclusive of people and a better understanding of where they are in their fitness milestones. We look at this as a two-part process with phase one focuses on meeting the requirements of the consent decree. Phase two will focus on MDSP's outreach and recruiting, testing capabilities, and data analysis. We're all hurting to recruit in law enforcement. We want to make sure we put the best package available for those that are interested in law enforcement, particularly interested in being a Maryland State Trooper. Recruiting and retention. As you see, our recruiters are actively working, as indicated by the numbers displayed on your screen there. MDSP has attended nearly 500 recruiting events so far this year. We ask that you encourage anyone thinking about a career in law enforcement to give the Maryland Department of State Police seriously strong consideration as their career choice in this particular field. MDSP Service Year Option. This is a program that started under Secretary Montero in the governor's cabinet. And MSP, we've learned a lot from this program. More importantly, we've learned a lot from the young people that have chosen to participate in this program. The slides you see highlights one individual, Habiba, who came here, and not only did we teach her, she took the time to teach us working at Crime Lab. Her impact was felt more than just by the people at Crime Lab. It was felt by everybody that she interacted with. One of the things that we were able to glean from this program, we hear directly what young people are thinking about, not just that one young person, but all their friends. They stay in contact with their friends, they share experiences, and they share what they're experiencing within the Maryland Department of State Police. She happened to be assigned to the MSP Forensic Services Division, which was great for her because it centered right around her interest in forensics and crime scene investigation. She was not our only success story in that particular field. We had another individual that we hired straight out of high school, once again, whose passion was in the automotive field. That being said, we placed that young man, 18 years old, in an adult working environment. Not only did he learn about vehicle repair, following process, safety measures, checks like that, he came back and told us what he understood about vehicles, as it was truly his passion. He had worked in auto shop. He had always worked on his own car. And at this point, we brought him on as an employee, and we're hoping that we can continue this process with other young people. This time around, we will have 2 employees that are starting soon, and it's our hope to increase our capacity. We only had 2 this time. We were hoping to have 4, but the door here is open. Recent accomplishments and improvements. Under my leadership, for the first time in the 103 history of this year of this department, we happen to have highly qualified lieutenant colonel overseeing the criminal investigation division. We have the second African-American female ever appointed to the rank of major in 103 years. My senior advisor for local partnerships, Mr. Reginald Lawson, who returned to MSP after 30 years away from the department, is providing leadership, team building, conflict resolution, management training across the United States to commercial and government and military clients. He brought that experience back here. He started out as a Maryland State Trooper. He now comes back to bring his experiences in the private sector to us, so we have a better understanding as to what's going on in the world, where we're headed, and how we can become even better. One of the things about that, Mr. Lawson gets out and he travels the state. Nothing that he does is done from sitting behind a desk. He goes out, he presses the flesh, he has contact with people. Contact he has, he comes back, we look at it and examine it and decide what's the best course of action to make these people better, to enhance professional development, and have everybody understand that MSP is a great place to work, and everybody has an active role in making MSP a better place to work. Over the past year, we've continued our commitment in events, recognizing diversity within our workforce and focus on employee morale. We prioritize the celebration of Black History Month in a variety of ways that include an in-person Black History Month celebration at MDSP headquarters. We're excited to report that 100% of the attendees shared that the event exceeded their expectations. We hosted various women's events and believe it's important to recognize that 22% of the Maryland Department of State Police workforce consists of women. We've also been recognized for diversity within our internal impact newsletter and the family focus section. We celebrate the ethnic diversity of our personnel, including Hispanic Heritage Month, Filipino National Heritage Month, and others. I think it's truly important to understand that we represent many different ethnic groups, and to have them speak out and give you their perspective. It's important for the employees to understand there's so much you don't know about the person that you're working shoulder to shoulder with, and we use this as a vehicle to share that information. We continue to advocate for our military participation and welcome home troops from their military assignments with meetings that include celebrations. Hey, we're happy to have you back. We have a detailed integration process. We don't simply bring you back from military service and put you right back into the MSP process. We bring you in a slow graduated process to make sure that you're comfortable as you return to the job that you left when you went to your military service. This past year, we were honored to be nominated for the Employer Support of the Guard and Reserves Above and Beyond Award, which is awarded to employees who advocate for employees to participate in the military. One of our own employees was nominated within the MDSP. One of the things that I think people think about, we have so many people that transition from the military to the MSP. We have a lot of people after 3 to 5 years service with the Maryland State Police, they go out and they join the military as a reservist. And I think my hat's off to them for serving twice. It's very important that we recognize their contribution and continue to move forward. Our commitment to best practices overall, MSP remains dedicated to building and maintaining strong community relationships. We actively seek and welcome feedback from those who interact with our troopers. Citizen comment forms are distributed during all traffic stops and contacts made with members of the public. Year to date, we've received over 200 responses, with 88% of those responses being complimentary. We also have an online survey available on our webpage. In 2024, our survey included over 300 responses, which is a considerable increase from the 211 we received in the previous year of 2023. 64% of these responses rated our services provided to the citizenry as excellent. 65% of the responses rated the attitude of the trooper as being excellent. And I think that's very important. A lot of times when we have contact with the public, it's not at the best time, or it's at a critical moment in their life where they're experiencing a trauma or a trying event. To hear that the feedback that the trooper's attitude was positive, the trooper's attitude was excellent, is absolutely incredible. We're meeting people where we need to meet people and where they need us to meet people. As we move forward, we'll continue to monitor that feedback, and we're hoping that that trend continues. And that's something that we're sharing with the young people that are in the academy now. They understand what they're stepping into. We can share this in a controlled environment, and we lay the foundation for them to develop the ability to think critically during tense situations. Some notable highlights and future commitments. Superintendent, I'm proud to share that the MDSP has an excellent working relationship with our union, SLEOLA, State Law Enforcement Officers Alliance. We're focused not only on our relationships, but also on integrity. As a result of feedback and internal performance reviews, we recently made some serious changes within the department at the Internal Affairs Division to better provide quality and timely services to the citizens. And I can't stress enough, to the citizens, but also the troopers. We're currently rebuilding the Internal Affairs Division. We're going to rebuild and strengthen this division. We've assigned a new commander and command staff. Eventually, we'll assign new personnel to the Internal Affairs Division. In doing that, we're looking at best processes nationwide. We've reached out to some neighboring departments to see how they do things, to ask them to come in and help us with an assessment as to what we're doing. We're going to continue to build this process that we started back in June, and additional layers of review for cases including brutality, excessive force, false reports, harassment, and sexual harassment. I stand behind the recent decision to improve this unit and look forward to what it's going to actually look like in the days ahead. It's a tough step, but it was a necessary step. And I think we will build a unit that everybody can be comfortable with, sworn and civilian. Not that they weren't comfortable with the old process, but we're seeing we can do so much more. And remember, everything we do is centered on our transparency in this matter. While positive news sometimes can be overshadowed by the negative, rest assured the MSP leadership is hard at work to support efforts in commitment and transparency and trust. There is nothing more important than our relationship with the community, and that's something we're going to continue to work at. Senior leadership recently participated in the Maryland Commission on LGBTQIA Affairs on the symposium back in October 24th, and I have to say, it's enlightening to hear people give their perspective and immediately take that back to see how we can use that to move forward. That, in conjunction with the successful implementation of the consent decree, we'll also use each of these pieces as we continue to move forward with the P3 program the diversity roundtable meetings, ODI future training sessions on various aspects that we can look at to mold the department that everyone is truly proud of. I think we have a great department. We do a great job, but we can actually do better. And doing better, the key point in that is we need input externally and internally. The internal people that get the job done are a wealth of knowledge. We need to make sure, one, they know their voice is heard. Two, they speak and understand they are part of the change in the future of this department. We all move together as a unit. With that being said, thank you. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Colonel Butler. If there are questions from the committee, please raise your virtual hand and we'll call them in the order that we see them. I wanted to ask a question on one of the things that you touched on at the end there with regards to the internal affairs unit. So it's been reported that much, if not all, of the leadership at the internal affairs division has been transferred out. That includes one captain, one lieutenant, 6 sergeants, 1 detective sergeant, 2 corporals. I'm not sure who is left, and maybe if you can clarify who remains in the internal affairs department, because my understanding was that there were only 2 sworn officers that were moved in, too, a captain and a lieutenant. How is the internal affairs department, going to function with just these 2 individuals? Are there others that are still remaining there? And what was the intention behind, clearing out what looks like the entire leadership of the division?
Senator, thank you for your question. Internal Affairs Department currently has a captain and a lieutenant that have been placed in command, and we also pulled in investigators from different bureaus across the department. We have investigators that we pulled in from the criminal intel section, criminal investigation section, and some from patrol. So you can rest assured that complaints coming in, they're being processed, they're being answered properly. When we go back to look at what we did, it may seem extreme to some, but after some internal concerns came to our attention, we thought it best to start over completely. And in starting over completely, we haven't made any drastic moves to push people in or to push processes. We're going to take an accurate assessment as to where we stand, what occurred, what we need to do in the future. And we've also reached out to other departments to see how they form their processes and how we can implement change that takes us where we need to go with timely investigations that are done accurately, that meet timelines, and that satisfy the concerns and really what the citizens deserve in the state of Maryland and those that traverse the state of Maryland.
Why did you feel it was necessary to take kind of the severe step of completely removing and transferring out the leadership? Was that the entire division, or was there anyone that remained, or is everyone new? Is everyone there currently new?
We still have 2 civilians assigned there, but from what you said, we turned over pretty much the entire internal affairs division. And I think that, as people look at that from 1,000 yards, yes, there are many different options you had. Do you do it piecemeal, or do you start over to build the best product you can? Based upon the information that was presented to me, reviewed with legal counsel and some other entities, it was best simply to start over.
Certainly understand that you can't go into specific details of certain cases, but at a high level, can you articulate what those concerns were with the internal affairs division that led to kind of this significant action?
Sure, I'll say this. When someone makes a complaint, they want to make sure that their concerns are heard, they're investigated in a timely fashion, and that there is constant communication between the investigator and that complaining party. Some of the things that were presented from within, it told me very clearly that there were some issues we needed to address. And as I said before, you can do things piecemeal, or you can just stop where you are, bring in a new command staff, bring in some supplemental investigators, give it a good hard look to make sure your practices are in line with national best practices. That was the option I chose. Having been here for 30 years now, it was a tough decision, but sir, rest assured, when everything comes out, I think everybody involved will realize it was the right decision.
Okay, I guess to follow up on that, because we still hear from a lot of troopers and former troopers in this role who have reached out, and I certainly understand that you just outlined a lot of recent efforts that have been made. When these folks contact us, there's still a perception that there have been troopers in the past who were fired or pushed out of Maryland State Police for discriminatory reasons, and in light of the fact that internal affairs has now been completely overhauled, is there any means or ability to go back and reassess some of those decisions that were made under the prior leadership of internal affairs? And I bring that up because, for example, there have been concerns have been amplified by recent reporting of a trooper who was allowed to stay on the force after an incident over in Ocean City that was not followed. Prosecutors decided not to press, but with the suspect that they had as part of a sting. So, whereas troopers, other former troopers feel like they were pushed out for much lesser reasons, is there any ability to reassess the quality of those investigations that have already been conducted under the prior IA? And were the issues related more to complaints from the public or or were the concerns more about timelines or policy and less about the quality of investigations that took place at IA?
Senator, I would say that they center around both. And one of the things we did when we saw the first inklings, we went back and gave a good hard look at some of the previous decisions. What you saw in the paper last Friday was truly damning and quite frankly embarrassing. However, the person that made that decision to follow that particular route with that case is no longer with the department. And I don't want to get too much because I know there's some litigation that centers around that, but I think I can affirm that I am committed to doing what's right. And it may not always be palatable at the onset, but I think as we gain momentum and we move forward and people see what the end result is, people will certainly understand why we took the course of action that we did.
Is there any ability for cases that were previously looked at under the prior leadership at IA to be re-examined?
That is something we're actually doing now.
Okay. So if there are folks that were formerly with the agency that have reached out with concerns and would like their case re-examined, is that something we can reach out to you about?
You're talking about a high volume of cases. I will not say no to any of those requests. However, the timeliness, remember, we're dealing with current cases and those older cases. We will not shy away from doing what's right. Doing what's right is difficult. The decision I made was difficult, but I think it's necessary in the best interest of the department. And one of the things I'd like to share with you, we received emails and communications from troopers that understood and embraced the decision that I made to turn over the staff at IAU and install a new staff.
Okay. And with regards to the concerns of IAU, were the complaints coming from the public or were there complaints more internally from other officers
I would say
that
both.
led you to this decision?
I would say both.
Okay. I anticipate that you're going to be, I guess, bringing more folks in because it seems like, there were a lot of people that were transferred out, but as of now, only 2 additional sworn officers transferred in, right?
Permanent transfers, yes. Sir, I can assure you I did not make a decision without a system in place to make sure that the complaints that came in were properly addressed. This was not a draconian decision. We did take into consideration what we would need to do in the future to sustain the level of performance that we needed or we desired. So I think we have a good stopgap in place. Complaints that come in are being properly investigated. They're being assigned to investigators. As we may have the need for more investigators, we will temporarily move more people into that unit.
Okay. If we can follow up with you offline with some of these cases that, may warrant a re-examination, we'll go ahead and do that too.
Yes, Senator.
I see that Delegate Lewis has his hand raised. Go ahead.
Good morning, Delegate Lewis.
Good morning. First, Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to ask a question. And Colonel Butler, thank you for the presentation. I want to start off by congratulating you on your process as it relates to the consent decree and staffing and whatnot. We are really pleased to see that you all are working expeditiously on that. My question actually was something from the beginning on these. I think you referenced diversity panels with staff. What does that consist of? You know, I guess what's the format of these panels?
Well, these panels are put together. As I said, it's 20 people. We solicited input for participation from people across the department. We were hoping to touch each group, ethnic group, gender, everything across the board. And for the first time, we actually included civilians. Civilians wasn't simply, hey, I need a civilian employee from this walk of life or that walk of life. We wanted to make sure we had civilian employees that were mothers, fathers, single fathers. Everybody's perspective is unique. And I think the biggest thing is to get them in the room, get people comfortable, and develop a synergy. We're not talking about just their input. A lot of these people are informal leaders within the department. They're trusted by their peers. So we want them to be that conduit that brings information to us.
I guess what I'm asking more specifically is like, you know, is this is it you and the command staff bringing these folks together? Is it HR bringing folks together? Because when you have, let's say, the hierarchy and the chain of command there, it can have a muting effect on people's ability to speak comfortably, as you would imagine. So I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, you know, how is it? I understand that you all were very intentional about putting together a diverse audience. I'm wondering, like, actually the format of the feedback, is it like, how is it structured such that people can comfortably, I think, help you reach the goal of what you want to reach, right? Is it HR? Are you guys taking feedback through like anonymous surveys or something from them?
Okay, Delegate Lewis, I understand your question perfectly. The executive sworn command staff is not involved in this process.
Okay.
This is handled by Mr. Lawson, as I described before. Reginald Lawson, he's my senior advisor. He has a wealth of knowledge from the private sector. This is something that's done in the private sector quite frequently to make sure that they're going the right direction. We place them in that environment. We allow them to speak freely. Then we want the truth to come back. He brings us back that information and we decide what the best course of action is. Some of the things you get back are things that we would have never gleaned, obviously, having sworn personnel in there. People we understand will be hesitant to talk, but something as simple as there being a difference in how sworn personnel put in for transfers versus civilian personnel. That was something we handled in very short order. Sworn personnel years ago went from submitting paper transfers to an online system. We've done the same thing for civilians. It's an online system. They can see where they are. When you start to bring that sense of equality and fairness into the room, that's the conduit. It's going to get you even more truth to allow you to make the decisions that are best for everyone.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that feedback. Most of the questions I had, Senator Lamb offered. That was the only one that he didn't bring up. That structure that allows free.
Sir, your voice is falling off just a little bit on my end.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think it's crucially important that we have ways for staff to give anonymous feedback back so that you can reach those goals. So I'm glad to hear that is working with that degree of separation. My other questions were asked by Chair Lamb. So thank you. I appreciate the feedback.
Thank you, Delegate.
Thank you, Delegate. Are there any additional questions? I don't see anyone's hands up. Let me check
I have
again.
some additional questions, I guess.
Okay, I'll turn it over to Chair Lamb.
Sure. Thank you. To follow up on Delegate Lewis's question, because this is an issue that we saw recently at Perkins State Hospital, where there were things going on within some of our state mental health institutions that didn't reach the level of the secretary for her awareness, significant issues as well. And so, you know, when Delegate Lewis brings up the fact that, you know, is there a way for staff within the agency to comfortably bring up concerns in a way that's anonymous. We have heard from current former employees that they feel that when these concerns are brought up, somehow word about them is, reaches leadership or their supervisor and whatnot in a way that is able to identify them. And so, people are fearful for speaking up, right? And so, I think, is there some way of ensuring, one, that to Doug Lewis's point, that these are really kept anonymous, that supervisors aren't all of a sudden being made aware and then they're coming down on the employee that communicated that concern. And two, if there are bad apples within the agency, as we kind of saw at the Maryland Department of Health, that prevented significant issues or concerns from reaching you or senior leadership there, is there some way for them to be able to communicate that or bypass, I guess maybe their immediate level above, to get that information out that's significant for you and other leaders there to know?
Yes, we do receive anonymous complaints. We investigate anonymous complaints. The only problem with the investigation of anonymous complaints, we normally send back a letter to let you know what the finding of the complaint was. We don't have that, we don't have that available to us to contact the complainant. But I can assure you, we do investigate those complaints. We've had anonymous complaints that we've investigated, and we've actually sent the outside agencies to investigate. When it comes to bringing your concerns forth, we hold people accountable at every step of the process. If it's a serious complaint, and every complaint in and of itself is serious, you look beyond the allegation. You look at the concern of the employee. Every employee should want to come to work each day, and they should know that they're going to be treated fairly. We look at those complaints. We monitor those situations. ODI has been very aggressive within the process of reviewing these complaints, speaking with the complainant, and also keeping in touch with the complainant. We don't cross over and ask ODI who the complainant is or what's going on with this matter. They operate separate. We're going to keep it that way. They operate separate. They're charged with making sure that we have a fair and impartial process and that nobody is subject to retaliation. If that does happen, the employee will be held accountable.
About ODEI, I guess I had recently heard that the director and the deputy director have resigned from their positions. Is that accurate?
The director took another job in state employment. The deputy director has stepped up and is doing a solid job. We do have a job solicitation out for the director position right now.
Okay. So the former deputy director is now currently the acting director, I guess, of ODEI.
Yes, Senator.
Okay. My understanding is that there was also at least one trainer, I think, that was brought into ODEI to help with some of this outreach and awareness of the employees, but that trainer has also recently left, probably within the last 6 months or so, too. Is that accurate? Is that a concern for the office to be able to continue to do that outreach and education of the other employees there?
Senator, I will say that's not accurate. Having just spoke with the individual that does that training and statewide outreach just a week ago, they are very aggressively tackling the chores that are before them. They travel the state, meeting with people, leave their business card. If people don't want to meet with them right then and there is an avenue in place for them to contact that individual with any information later on and maintain their anonymity.
Okay. Do employees, as they leave the department, do exit interviews to understand why employees separate from the department?
Yes, they do. Some employees do refuse exit interviews, but that's very rare. Those exit interviews are reviewed over at Human Resources Division, and also I review them to make sure we're heading in the right direction.
Are there any top line trends or commonalities they can share from the exit interviews?
When you start to look at it, a lot of it is financial. Though the state police has received a serious boost in salaries over the years, a lot of it's financial. And a lot of it is people that law enforcement provides considerable stress, not only to the officer or trooper, it puts a lot of stress on the family. And you have people that are looking, they've just had newborns. Something as simple as being able to drop their kid off or pick their kid up or do whatever at a moment's notice is critical. It comes down to a lot of times quality of life issues, opportunities to present themselves based on the training that they've received as a Maryland State Trooper. So there are a myriad of things, and we look at those to make sure that we are satisfying what the employees need.
Okay. I mean, those exit interviews might be helpful in us understanding some of the challenges that are facing staffing of the agency, the department. I think, you touch on one of them, which sounds like maybe the pay isn't enough to be able to continue to attract or retain employees. I guess is that a concern to be able to keep good folks that should remain with the force?
So I think in every profession across the nation, pay is always a concern. Sometimes things go beyond pay, quality of life while you're at work. That's why it's so important to me to maintain relationships with the State Law Enforcement Officers Alliance. We want to make sure that we know what the needs of the employees are, and we can sit down and address those and move towards the right direction and build towards what employees really need and what employees desire to stay in this profession. We don't want this looked at as just a job. It's a career choice.
With regards to ODI, I assume you monitor or follow the trends with ODI's probable cause findings.
Mm-hmm.
Has that increased or decreased over the years, or what direction is that going?
I'd say at this point, it's probably neutral. I could go back and review that data and get back with you, but there is nothing alarming at this point where we've seen a tremendous spike. That's something that we actively keep an eye on. And if there was something that was truly, truly out of the ordinary, we would be on top of it.
Okay.
And as you go back and look at the previous slides, the cases are down, but we're not simply talking about cases, you're talking about findings.
Well, I mean, if they're neutral, that could mean that people are just still not willing to come forward, I guess, to bring these concerns up, right?
It very well could. However, I don't think that's the case with the individual we've hired to do the outreach. He's not a Maryland State Trooper. He's a person that cares. He's a person that has direct communication. He doesn't talk at people, he talks to people. And I would say that's the hallmark of everyone over there at that office. They talk to people. They let people express themselves. They let people know that they've been heard, and they let people know what actually exists within policy and what they can do to help them.
Okay. So you monitor the number of probable cause findings out of ODI, and I guess if there's an increase, you'd be concerned.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I see Senator Benson has her hand up. Go ahead, Senator.
Morning, Senator Benson. You may be muted, ma'am. Senator Lamb, she's muted. I can see. Thank you.
There we go.
Am I good?
Yes,
I
ma'am.
can hear you. Good.
Yes. Good morning. Thank you very much for the presentation. I need to ask several questions here. How possible is it for you to provide for us the organizational structure of the Maryland State Police? That's number one. And could you also provide for this committee the process that's used in the assignment of troops as they work at various barracks in the state of Maryland? How many barracks do you all have?
23.
Okay, how they are. I'm just interested in, well, it's not just me, but we as a committee would be interested in knowing the processes used in the assignment of troops. And the other thing is that we have heard so much about is the testing and the promotion process that's in place. If you could provide that information for us, it would be very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, Senator, those won't be a problem. The organizational structure, You can actually glean something from it online, but we can send you an actual org chart so you
That'd be
understand
wonderful.
exactly what you're looking at. As far as the process of assigning troopers to an installation, you have to think MSP installations are somewhat unique in the sense that you have some that provide full service law enforcement services, some that based on memorandum of understandings with larger county departments, we may only handle traffic on specific roadways. All those things taken in conjunction with the workflow at each installation tells us how many troopers we may need per installation. One of the things you'll see with some of these installations, say particularly the Eastern Shore, as traffic and things increase in the summertime, we may temporarily assign people or move specialized units, such as the traffic incident management unit, to a particular installation to help them with their needs as far as personnel. I think your third portion was the promotional process. Are you able to be a little more specific what you're looking for about the promotional process itself? Its steps.
The steps that are required. How is it that an individual, what is put in place that would give an opportunity for a trooper to be promoted?
Okay. The promotional process itself, it's 3 parts. The first part is the written test. The written test, each step of the process is based on KSAs, knowledge, skills, and applications unique to the rank that they're looking to attain. One of the things about that, the questions on the test are based on job task analysis. What would you do on a regular basis at a particular rank? So you can imagine the questions that we have for a first line supervisor at the rank of corporal are going to be a lot different than what we might have for a first sergeant or lieutenant. After that portion is completed, they submit a structured resume. The structured resume looks at their job performance history and they compare themselves to those KSAs, knowledge, skills, and abilities based on certain aspects. Once that's done, they participate in an oral interview process. The oral interview allows them to address certain scenarios amongst 3 assessors. We typically pick assessors from similarly situated state police agencies that provide full service coverage, and they look at their performance and their responses and rate them based upon the KSAs. Once all of those things are done, all those scores are tabulated and we come up with a list. Once that list is established, we go straight down that list.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you.
Thank you, Senator Benson. I have a follow-up question on just recruitment. I've been seeing around the reporting around the DOJ settlement and how it can impact the hiring of women and Black troopers. I was wondering if you had any information how we can improve the hiring rates of Asian American troopers as well.
You know, I think when we look at the DOJ settlement, we're using a test that other departments used. Obviously, there's a problem with that test and the way that test was being scored. We no longer look at a failure in one phase to rule you out. We take you through the entire process. I think one of the questions that came up on the physical side, why do we need to know how fast an individual can run a 1.5 miles? The moment you hit the MSP Academy, you're in a rigorous environment. We need to know what your physical baseline is. And the graduation that we just had Friday, we charted an individual that started off on the lower end of the testing scale. They were noted to be the most improved physically. When we know where we're starting at with an individual, it's a lot easier on us to build a fitness package to help them improve. If we don't, we kind of place ourselves in a precarious position where we have the potential to place people in medical jeopardy. 50% minority graduation at the last class is pretty indicative of our outreach efforts. And I think if you play the video that's available on YouTube, take a look at the class president and a lot of recipients. MSP is reaching out. The problem we have is we're competing with other departments across the DMV area, and there are other departments. They may be more attractive to people. We're trying to make sure that we build the best package when it comes to the state police. There are other departments that are just as good, just as competitive. And I think a lot of it comes down to what contact they have with an officer. I think our last survey, we looked at approximately 80% of the people that we bring into the job are recruited by another sworn member.
And would just encourage you to also include outreach to potential Asian American candidates as well. I think we want the state police to reflect the communities and the populations they serve, and I think it's important to, in addition to making sure that we have adequate hiring of women and Black troopers, of Asian American troopers as well.
Sir, I share your concern. We've reached out to every community, and we'll continue to do that. It doesn't matter, military, minority communities, HBCUs. We're going to go knock on everyone's door. We want to make sure that everyone knows what we're about. Two, they can have a home here, they can have a career here, and they can have a choice and a voice in the direction of the Maryland Department of State Police.
Okay. My last question is, you certainly outlined a lot of policy changes earlier in some of the slides that you went through and talked through. As I mentioned earlier, hear from a lot of current former troopers, and there's still staff that are at the agency who are concerned about leaders or personnel that were there before that have been involved in discrimination or turning a blind eye to different issues. What can we tell troopers, former troopers, the public who are concerned that policy changes can only go so far without significant staffing or leadership changes? That, at the end of the day, policy changes can only work when there's good management and good leadership. And I think there's been some concern that they haven't seen that level of change or review of ensuring that there's good management, clean management coming in, new leadership coming in as well.
Sir, understanding your concerns, I think there are two sides to that coin. There are other people that come forward and say, yes, they're very happy with the changes in the direction we're going. You can change policies all you want. What you have to change is human behavior. Human behavior is changed by knowing that people are being managed effectively. They're accountable for their actions. And when they do have a misstep, that it's addressed immediately. Is it a training issue? Is it a disciplinary issue? We have to make sure that supervisors at every level, from your corporal all the way up to me, understand what the expectations are of that role, and they have to hold people accountable. I think one of the things you hear and see in organizations across the nation, when you say accountability, it carries a negative connotation. Accountability is twofold. Not only do you correct inappropriate behavior, but you also reinforce positive behavior. There has to be a two-way exchange.
Okay. Any other questions from the committee? Okay. Well, thank you, Colonel Butler. We have some information we'll follow up with you offline about. We appreciate your time here. Chair Attar, anything else to add?
I don't. Thank you, Chair Lamb. I guess at this point, we can move on to the role of the State Medical Director on Workplace Bullying. We have the Department of Budget Management Secretary, Helene Grady, with us today. Secretary Grady, you can begin. Thank you.
Thank you all for your time.
Good morning. Oh,
Good
sorry,
morning.
Superintendent. Good morning. I just want to confirm, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So it's great to see you. My name is Helene Grady. I'm the Secretary of Budget and Management. I want to thank Chair Attar and Chair Lamb for inviting DBM to join you this morning to talk on two topics. One, the State Medical Director, and second, an update on our work to mitigate and prevent an environment of bullying in the workplace. I want to start by just introducing my team who's joined with us today. So I have here with me Raquel Coombs, who's our Chief of Staff at DBM, along with Catherine Hackman, who is our currently acting Chief HR Officer for DBM and for the SPMS, the State Personnel Management System, and also permanently our Deputy Director of our Office of Personnel Services and Benefits, and also Dana Phillips, our Director of Ledge Affairs for DBM. So thanks to the team for joining. I want to give just some very brief introductory remarks before Catherine Hackman walks the committee through the materials that we've shared. First, I want to share an update. Many of the committee members, I believe, know that we have been in recruitment mode this year for the next leader of our HR function at DBM. We are recruiting for a chief HR officer. Unfortunately, it's taken us a bit longer than we had anticipated. We actually had a very successful recruitment and landed a candidate who we were really excited about just earlier this fall, a few weeks ago. Unfortunately, within just a few days of starting in the role, our candidate had to resign due to very unanticipated personal circumstances. So we are unfortunately back in the mode of recruitment for that really important and critical role for the administration, chief HR officer for the SPMS. In the meantime, we are thrilled to have Catherine Hackman, who's an incredibly long-serving and very committed HR professional who's continuing to help us keep the trains running on time and keep making progress on our priorities while we're in this recruitment mode. I just wanted to share that update with the committee. Some of you may have heard about the hire action earlier this summer, and just wanted to share that we are unfortunately back in recruitment mode there. Second, ahead of Catherine's update for the committee, I really just want to emphasize in particular that improving the workplace culture and clamping down on bullying in the workplace is a key priority for the administration and for our agency heads. In particular, I just want to share that there are two key things in our first year and a half as an administration on the job that we've done to further our efforts in this regard. First, in the MOU that we have with AFSCME that we negotiated last December and put into place effective this year, we agreed to new language in that MOU regarding our commitment to working together to address bullying in the workplace. That language includes a commitment to meeting with AFSCME at least 2 times per year, where we review data regarding bullying complaints by agency. We have put that into place. Catherine's going to give you an update on how we're tracking that data and some significant efforts by our staff to be on top of the incidences of bullying complaints. And we are pleased to share that we've also held that first meeting with AFSCME just, I believe, in early September. Very productive meeting, and we look forward to continuing those efforts together. Second, just want to share that the second major initiative that we've undertaken so far in the administration, and Superintendent Butler spoke to this to some degree, is that we launched, as far as we understand, the first ever statewide culture survey, workplace culture survey. It was a really key priority for the administration when we came into office, and for all of our agency heads. We've gleaned some very interesting data from that. Agencies are working on action plans specific to their agencies with regard to initiatives that they intend to carry out in order to impact the engagement scores based on the workplace survey. So it's been a really, really helpful tool for us as an administration, something that we intend to continue. And I just wanted to share that update with the committee. If there are no questions for me, I'd like to have Catherine walk the group through the materials that we've shared. And then we're obviously happy to take questions and discuss whatever's on your mind once Catherine gets through the material. Turn to Catherine, and Dane, I'm not sure if you're going to share the materials for Catherine or if the committee staff are going to do that.
I believe staff is going to go through the slides for us today.
Okay, great.
Good morning, Senator Lamb, Delegate Attar, and members of the committee. My name is Catherine Hackman. As Secretary Grady said, I am currently the acting Chief HR Officer, formerly known as the Executive Director of the Office of Personnel Services and Benefits. I'm very happy to be here with you today to talk about the 2 topics that you requested that we speak on. The first being the role of the State Medical Director, and the second, an update on the bullying in the workplace policy and some of the work that we're doing around that. So if we can go to the first actual slide. I think there's maybe like a title slide in between. So the first thing I want to talk about is the state medical director and the role of the state medical director in the state personnel management system. So when you think of the word state medical director, you really think of a person, and there is a person that we typically work with at Concentra. Concentra is actually the state medical director. That entity is the state medical director. The authority for the state medical director really comes out of the Code of Maryland regulations. In that section of the COMAR, essentially the DBM secretary basically delegates her authority to this entity, which in this case is Concentra, to perform certain functions on her behalf. Those functions, I think you can see on the next slide, are start to explain those. So the state medical director performs routine pre-placement physicals. So those are, obviously prior to employment, there are certain jobs that require a physical, and the state medical director will perform those. I think those are generally sort of outsourced physicals, but ultimately they are under the authority of the state medical director. The state medical director also performs workability exams and fitness for duty exams. Fitness for duty exams are really more of a limited exam. Those are typically, for example, if let's say a correctional officer has maybe a shoulder surgery and needs to return to work, they could be required to go under a fitness for duty return to work exam. Workability exams are much more complex exams. Those are really determining whether or not an employee's physical or psychological capabilities exist to perform the essential functions of the employee's job duties. Again, so those are way more involved. Oftentimes, the state medical director will require an employee also to see someone who has a specialty. So, for example, the state medical director typically is not going to do psychological exams. They'll have another person who has the qualifications to perform that exam as the SMD. I think we can go to the next slide. The state medical director also acts as the medical review officer, also known as the MRO. So that role requires if an employee is drug tested, and let's say the employee the drug test result is positive for an opioid, there may be a reason for that that is perfectly legitimate. The state medical director reviews those results, will discuss the results with the employee or the applicant, and determine ultimately if that exam will be reported out as a non-negative lab result. Not only does the SMD review that and have that discussion, the SMD may also be required to testify at hearings at the Office of Administrative Hearings. If, for example, it's an existing employee and they are positive for some type of drug and they get a 15-day suspension and they appeal that, the SMD oftentimes will be called to testify as to those results at those hearings. You can go to the next slide. The SMD also plays a critical role in the leave bank and employee-to-employee leave donation programs, more so in the leave bank side of things. The leave bank process comes to DBM, so if an employee needs leave bank, they make the request to DBM. There is both an initial request that can happen, and then there is an appeal process. The SMD, I actually, in order to prepare for this, checked in to see about how many times does the SMD get involved in, for example, looking at the leave bank cases. And it was much higher than I thought it was. It's about 90 to 95%. On the front end, our staff they do like an administrative review. And so they're looking to see if the employee is actually qualified, meaning they are a member of the leave bank. And if they are in good standing, they don't have discipline within the last year, they've had a satisfactory PEP, they review those cases from that administrative perspective. They also have, we have and I'll forget the name, so I'm going to look, a software called MD meaning medical doctor, not MD Maryland, MD guidelines, and it has like a CPT coder in it or codes in it, which is the procedure terminology. So when an employee is requesting leave bank, they do submit an application and they submit medical documentation that often includes medical codes. And so that software will allow our staff, because they are not medical professionals, to take a look at what the request is and whether that request is in line with the software guidelines. Any doubts, they always talk to the state medical director. And like I said, about 90 to 95 cases do receive a medical review. That initial medical review is not terribly extensive unless it's necessary for it to be extensive. If there's questions, the agency can refer the employee for an exam by the state medical director. That doesn't happen as frequently. I was told that those medical reviews are typically about 10 minutes. Those are just really looking at the documentation that was submitted with the request and making sure that the request is in line with what the employee is asking for. I think that's it for that particular slide. I'm going to stop there because I don't know if you would prefer that I just go right into bullying, or if you want to stop and talk about the state medical director process in a little more detail. What's your preference?
I had a few follow-up questions on
Okay.
that issue, if that's okay. The reason that I had some questions was because a constituent had previously brought up a concern about going through this process that you kind of just outlined and seeing Concentra. But I think if they disagree, for example, with the medical determinations that are made, that there was no other process that they could go through to either bring in an outside physician or their own physician to do a follow-up evaluation. So, I guess I'm familiar with this because I also serve as a medical director for occupational health for another institution here in the state. And, there are instances where if an employee has a concern that I guess in this instance, the state medical director is not evaluating in a way that they believe aligns with the medical issue that they're seeing, that they can have an independent medical evaluation done in certain instances, like an IME being done. I'm not saying that needs to be done in every single instance, but I wonder, in the process that you just outlined, because this constituent had reached out, is there an ability for someone who does not believe that Concentra had evaluated their medical concern properly to have either their outside physician or another mutually agreed upon provider outside of the system to provide further guidance?
So I would say, based on the current procedures, that is not a possibility. The state medical director is the state's doctor, and so that is a final determination. There is no third-party review baked into the process right now.
So
Senator Lamb, if I can just comment a little bit further on that.
Sure.
So I've also been learning myself a bit more about the process with the state medical director, and there's in particular a case this summer that was brought to my attention that helped me learn a bit more and ask a lot of questions. And I think the question you're asking is one that we've been considering ourselves as well. And I stand by Catherine's response that according to the current process, the medical director's determination is final. I do have our AG team at DBM just looking into, for my sake, a few questions around the process, including what rules govern how much flexibility DBM or the employee agency, the state agency, has via the state medical director's determination of an employee's ability to return to work or not return to work or stay on leave. That's something I'm hoping to get a little better educated to on the basis, and either in statute or regulation for the flexibility that the state has via the medical director's determination, and would be happy to report back sort of where we land on that review. But I do agree with what Catherine has responded based on process to date so far.
Can you just clarify one more time what that review is of?
Your voice broke out.
Oh, sorry. Can you just, Secretary Grady, clarify what that
Sure.
review is of?
So I've asked our AGs at DBM to look into and provide some briefing for me into what rules govern how much flexibility either DBM or the agency that employs the state employee have via the state medical director's determination of an employee's ability to return to work or not return to work or stay on leave. I think your question has more to do with what flexibility the employee has or alternative appeal method the employee has. Be happy to kind of expand the review to include that as well, if that'd be helpful.
Got it. So the review that you've asked for with the AG's office is just pertaining to return to work. Is that correct? Those circumstances?
Specifically, yeah, that was the nature of the incident that I was exposed to and learning about this through.
Okay.
But I'd be happy to broaden it a bit further too, if it'd be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, if you could, that would be helpful. I do return to work evaluations almost every week, and I can understand, I think, the need to kind of review that process. But to the broader point that I was making, I think our constituent feels like they were terminated by the state for a medical condition, where the former employee disagreed with that medical determination, and there was no ability to appeal beyond that. And so she was separated from the state, and there was no possibility for appeal. It was just a determination by Concentra, and that was it.
Right. Yeah, I think that's similar to what I've asked my AGs to help look into and help educate me on. And I don't know the details of the case you're referencing. Happy to follow up offline and find out more. The case that I'm most familiar with that helped me understand more about this process, I believe the employee is still employed with the state.
That's correct.
Okay, we're happy to get you some more information offline, but this person was on the job, in-state employee, and her supervisor, I guess, to know, I guess forewarning, asked her to go to Concentra. This is again from her perspective, to go to Concentra for a medical evaluation. They did a medical evaluation, and then she was subsequently terminated with no ability to appeal. So
wow, I definitely would like to look into this case. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I would appreciate additional details as well, because if you're terminated, you do have an appeal process. That sounds strange, and I think we should look into it if we could get more details.
But based on the process you just outlined, there sounds like there is no appeal process, right? Concentra's determination is the end of the line.
Well, you asked me if there was a process for sort of appealing the medical determination, and I think the answer right now is no. And as the secretary said, we're certainly looking at whether or not we need to fine-tune the process. But if an employee is ultimately terminated from his or her position, there is an appeal process with regard to that adverse personnel action. If they were terminated, they would have an appeal right to being terminated.
I see what you're saying.
I'd love to have more details, because maybe there's something there that I'm not understanding, but generally speaking, if you're terminated, you absolutely have an appeal right. It may be a limited appeal right if you're an at-will employee, but even at-will employees have appeal rights if they're terminated.
Gotcha. So I understand what you're saying. So you're saying that they may not have an appeal ability under the medical determination aspect of this, but they would have the ability to appeal under just general termination protection clauses.
They were terminated, they would have
And Catherine can correct, my understanding is even in the case of a medical determination, if an agency were then to move to terminate, I think my recollection, and Catherine should definitely jump in, there's a process the agency needs to go through, and it includes some transparency with the employee. Catherine, can you describe that a little bit better than me?
So if you would be sent to the state medical director and for example, in this case, a workability occurred and the SMD said that this individual appears not to be able to return to their essential job duties in the foreseeable future, the agency has to go through a process to determine if the employee's eligible for an accommodation. So they would be required to do a task analysis, and there's a whole process around that that has to occur. If ultimately through that process, it is determined that the employee can't perform the essential functions of their job with a reasonable accommodation, with or without is the language of the law, then the agency would give an employee an options letter. And that options letter says, it appears that you can't perform your essential job functions with or without a reasonable accommodation. So therefore, we really have no choice here but to start the process of separating you from your position. And then the employee is given an option to look at disability retirement. But ultimately, if the employee does not voluntarily separate, then an action is taken to terminate. And that's the point at which an employee would have an appeal right. There's no termination that I'm aware of in the state personnel management system that could occur without triggering an appeal right. Again, it could be a limited appeal if the employee's at will, but it's still an appeal. A skilled or professional service employee who's not designated political special appointment or special appointment would have the full right to go through the administrative process all the way up through and including OAH and then beyond into the courts. So I would love to have more details just so we could check in to see what happened in that particular case.
Yeah, we'll follow up with you because I think there are provisions within we can say this reg, but 17.04.03.16 that seem to say that there's no appeal for medical separation. But we can follow up with you on that as well. I will say that there seems to be, in talking to others too, that there's a perception that there may be situations where employees are referred to a medical evaluation just for budgetary reasons, which obviously would be very concerning. That this is a way of calling employees out of state employment through the medical termination process. Obviously, we're hoping that's not the case. And if there are specific examples that come forward, we'll bring those to your attention too.
Please do. This is the first I've heard that assertion. So please do.
Yeah.
There's a perception out there, but I don't know. I don't have any specific examples to point to yet.
I don't know what motivation an agency would have with regard to budget guidelines or constraints or otherwise to be acting in that manner. So that would concern me deeply if that were happening.
Okay, thank you.
Are we ready to move to bullying in the workplace?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Right, so we can move on to the first slide. Thank you. So it's just a brief overview. I know that I'm aware that in the past you've had briefings on the bullying in the workplace policy. So I didn't want to go into too much detail about that, other than to say, it was initially it was a sort of a product of coming from the General Assembly asking DBM to work with exclusive bargaining reps to put together a policy. And we did that in really through, I think it was really through the whole year of 2016. I was on that joint committee with the exclusive reps. It was a very good exercise that we went through it and produced the bullying policy on January 1st of 2017. There have been some slight changes to it, as you would find in any kind of policy. You find sort of pinch points, and over time we've looked at those pinch points and we've made slight adjustments. And then most recently there was a change on October 1st, and that was because on the protected status side of the bullying complaint process, there was a change in the time that the EEO officer would have to do an investigation. So the policy was updated for that purpose. That's information on the slide. It went from 30 days to 60 days for them to do an investigation. And then it could potentially go an additional 30 days to complete the EEO protected status complaint investigation. On the non-protected status side, nothing has changed. It's remained the 30-day window. So we go to the next slide. So the obligations under the policy, there's a number of obligations that are placed on really all employees, and certainly heavy emphasis on supervisors and managers. That's on the next slide. The supervisors and managers absolutely have an obligation to report bullying that they either witness or that is brought to their attention. Employees are also obligated under the policy to report anything that they view that they believe meets the definition of bullying in the workplace. There is an ability to do an anonymous complaint, and those complaints have to be investigated in the same way that a complaint would be investigated that has a complainant's name attached to it, with the only obvious difference is that any written decision would not be provided to the anonymous complainant because the person is anonymous. But they still have to do all the steps. They still have to do, maintain the documentation, write up a finding, etc., and take action if they determine, based on the anonymous complaint, that there is a bullying behavior occurring. Employees, that includes managers and supervisors, all employees are obligated to take training when they are onboarded. And that is really automated through Workday for us. So we identify new employees and they are required to take the training. And then they have to take the training every 2 years thereafter. There is a different training that's given to supervisors and managers to sort of provide more detail and granularity around identifying workplace behaviors that are problematic. Again, I mentioned complaints have to be thoroughly investigated and findings must be issued based on the complaint. We are required also to keep data regarding the complaints, and I would like to talk about that in a little bit more detail. I'm not sure if whoever's moving the slides on my screen, they're not moving. Yeah, can we move one more time, I think? Thank you, I appreciate that. So earlier this year, our shared services division, who's really the entity that handles the Workday system for us and does a lot of programming and knows the system very well, came to us with an idea to utilize Workday to track bullying complaints. And that was really a genius idea and has been wonderful. We're still working with the report a little bit, but we can now produce a report at a moment's notice that is real-time data, and it tracks what is going on with bullying cases across the SPMS. It includes things like the complainant's name, the supervisor, the name of the alleged bully. There's an ability to drop documents in there. It tracks how long it's taking to complete the investigation, and it is also providing the outcome of the investigation. And between January 1st of this year and September 30th, we had 115 bullying complaints that were filed. There's 24 that are pending right now, but of the completed complaints, the ones that there is a finding, there's approximately 19% of them were sustained. The other thing that you can see in the report, which I really love, is there's a place where you can see, it can help you to track what happened with what did the agency do. And the other reason I really love the report is because at the DBM level, we can sort of spot whether or not we see trends in a particular agency. And that's been interesting and helpful. And I want to talk about that a little bit more, but I want to just maybe talk for a second about the challenges that we've identified. We did have the meeting that Secretary Grady mentioned with AFSCME very recently. I felt like that was a wonderful meeting. We met with Stuart Katzenberg and 2 individuals who are union presidents, union stewards, who came with all the receipts of their concerns, and I felt like it was a very productive meeting. And I think they really recognize the same things that we were looking at, which is that investigations are taking too long. And I feel like that is very problematic because, well, there's a couple of reasons it's really problematic. One reason it's really problematic is that it causes the complainants to sort of lose faith in the process that's happening because they're not getting feedback quickly. But the other reason that's concerning to me is that if the agency does determine that there's bullying that's happening, not only is that bullying going on while they're doing their investigation, but that it could be problematic on the side of where we're deciding that action needs to be taken, because we have very short turnaround times for imposing disciplinary action. So that is concerning, and we are trying to work with the agencies to troubleshoot why it's taking so long and what can we do to change that. The other thing that AFSCME raised with us, and I do agree is problematic, and we are working with the agencies on, is that they're not really always issuing written decisions, and they absolutely must. The bullying policy requires that a written decision is issued. And then when they are issued, sometimes they lack sufficient detail. And that's a fine line for agencies, because when you have a complainant who says, this person is bullying me, and the agency determines that's the case, you're now talking about something that's a confidential personnel action as to the bully, so to speak. So when you're writing your decision, you have to provide sufficient detail to let the complainant know that, yes, you've heard their message, you've interviewed X number of people. That's also sort of like a pinch point for the agencies, because you don't really want to identify who's been interviewed in really granular detail, because a lot of times when people are being interviewed, they say, I don't want my name to be known. I don't want to get in trouble, especially if it's a situation where it's an employee and a supervisor scenario. It's not always that, but those decisions are kind of difficult to write. And so I think agencies have not been doing really as good a job as they could be and should be doing. And we are trying to work with them on that particular point. One of the things AFSCME asked us for, and we have not provided to them yet, is more detail around the facilities where the bullying has occurred. I have gone back to the programmer for the report and asked them if we could get that column added. I don't have that column right now, so in order to do that, I would actually have to look each person up in Workday, and that's difficult when you're talking about over 100 cases. So I'm asking for us to fine tune that report a little bit. I'd like to also see the bargaining unit added and the bargaining status added, because I do believe all the exclusive reps have a right to ask about specific data around their populations, and the report isn't set up that way. So I am working on that, and I do recognize that's an area that we could definitely make an improvement, and we are working on doing that. So other ways in which we're trying to address the challenges around the statewide bullying policy and trying to make this process a better process is we have named a coordinator here at DBM who is also the person who's overseeing the training. I think that was a good way to make sure that we're doing what we need to do with regard to enhancing our training. I don't want our training to be static. I think the training is really something that needs to sort of grow as we learn pinch points that are happening. We are also asking the agencies to identify a central point of contact. I'm about halfway through that process. Once I get all the names of the individuals, and these would be the individuals who at the agency are accountable for investigating. If, let's say, for example, MPAC comes to us and says, hey, we've got these 3 bullying cases at MDH and we haven't heard anything, that we can say, oh, we need to go to this individual to deal with that particular problem. And then, so again, we are working on enhancing our training, and we are looking at putting out some additional guidance on how to write a written report that really provides enough detail to make the complainant comfortable that the case was investigated properly and thoroughly, and that the outcome is supported by sort of the write-up that we're providing to them. See if there's anything else. I think that's most of what I wanted to share with you. Do you have any questions that I could answer related to the policy?
Looks like
Kick
Senator
us off
Benson
with the question, then we'll turn to Senator Benson. Just to follow up on one of your slides, you kind of identified the fact that complaints or bullying investigations can take a long time. That's one of the concerns that we've been hearing too, that since you started this new Workday tracking system, how long is the average time to complete a case? And of the, I think 24 that are still pending, what's the longest one that's still open?
Could I get that information for you? I don't have that directly at my fingertips, but I can certainly get that for you. I'd have to do an analysis of the cases that we have. So you want the number, the average number of days it's taking?
Yeah, to have a case investigation just, done? And also, what is the longest case that's still open? Is it something that has been open for years, or is it simply just, nearing the end of its progress there?
So on that point, I would just like to just put like a little asterisk on what the answer I would give you is. Keep in mind that we just developed this report. And what we did was we asked agencies to go back and data load any cases they received beginning January 1st, 2024 to present, because it's a lot of work to put all those cases in our brand new system or in this brand new tracking process. First, we had to develop it. Then we had to train them on how to data load. Then they had to identify data loaders for each agency. And so we only have report information in our Workday system that goes back to January 1st of 2024. I will get you the average number of days it takes. I will tell you it is longer than 30 days. I absolutely know that to be a fact, but I will give you a more precise answer. And as far as whether cases are open for years, I mean, I don't believe so, but I'd have to look. I don't want to make a guess here, and I would have to probably ask the agencies that question, because really we only have data in our system going back to January 1st. So, but they are lagging. There is absolutely no doubt about it. One of the things that I noticed in looking at the report is because it also includes a column for the agency to write who is the investigator, that some of the agencies have the same one or two people that are doing investigations. I've identified that as an issue because that is definitely slowing down getting reports, getting the investigations done. If it's a big agency, for example, a public safety or an MDH. MDH doesn't seem to be doing that, but I have noticed that that is happening in public safety. I think that they want to have people that are trained investigators doing the investigating, and I do understand that, but I think they're getting overwhelmed. So, I mean, those bigger agencies are getting more cases. So that is a pinch point that I've identified.
I mean, with regards to the investigation, I've heard complaints over the years of bullying where the alleged bullier was either an agency's HR director or even the agency's leadership. One that recently comes to mind is, Perkins and the former CEO at Perkins Hospital, where a restraining order was sought by employees there against him. In these instances where the bullier or the alleged person conducting the harassment is agency leadership, where is such a person supposed to turn to report this?
So sometimes they've reported those incidents. Those don't come up that often. They may report them to DBM. Typically, if it's an agency head and that has happened, it gets reported up through the governor's office. And then they determine who would investigate. So if it's an agency head. Now, if in the situation involving the Clifton T. Perkins CEO, that would have gone, I'm sure, to the Secretary of MDH, who then I would assume would have signed someone outside of Perkins to conduct the bullying investigation. I don't know the facts of that particular situation, but that would be my guess based on the structure and the way that the bullying policy is written. It would go, it's appointing authority or agency head.
And I just wanted to chime in, Senator Lamb, to say that it's not infrequent that complainants do come directly to DBM.
Okay, so they could come directly to DBM in that instance, right? Because I think there were a lot of folks that were at Clifton T. Perkins that were concerned about where they could turn to make us aware. And, I don't, based on kind of prior conversations, I don't know if the secretary at MDH was aware of some of these concerns.
Yeah, I don't think any of us on the call from DBM are prepared to speak to the specifics of the Perkins issues. But I was just chiming in to say it's not infrequent that employees do share their complaints directly with DBM, and our team will always look into them. We'll coordinate with the agency as appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Senator Benson.
Yes, thank you very much. I just want to let you all know that in a number of instances of cases where people have complaints, a lot of times the problem prevails with the person, the director or the person at the top. The Chair just came up with something that's very valid. We got to come up with a better way of people having an avenue that they can explore without being fearful of retaliation. That really is a problem. I want to just let you know that. And so I'm just very concerned about how we can put a mechanism in place so that when people step up to the plate, they won't be fearful that they're going to lose their job.
Appreciate that
I'm
feedback.
wondering if you all can comment on that, but that is really a grave concern. A lot of people, listen, it is not just Perkins. I want you all to know that. Those of us who sit in these positions in Annapolis, and I'm sure the chair can speak to that, there are people, we constantly get complaints from different agencies about the behavior that's going on within their agency. But they're fearful to come forward because they think that if they do, there's going to be retaliation and they'll possibly end up losing their job.
Thank you for that feedback. I think that's really important and helpful for us. I think Catherine has described that this process at DBM and within the SPMS around, getting a handle on the incidents and the culture around bullying in our workplaces is evolving, and we've done a lot of work this year, but we have a lot more work to do, and I think it's helpful. Your feedback is helpful, and we will take that under consideration as we continue to refine these processes and work with the agencies on training and additional, initiatives that we can pursue. We will keep in mind in particular the fear of retaliation and ensuring that there are alternate pathways for employees to report complaints when they feel that they can't pursue their normal pathway in their agency.
What happens in the case where the complaints from a particular agency is continuous? It just continues to be a problem in certain agencies, like Perkins. What happens? Is there any are you all in a position to do something with the person who's in charge of the agency in removing the person, terminating the person, or taking action against the person? Something has to happen because some of these agencies, the complaint is numerous and nothing is ever done with the person at the top.
I think, the tracking that we put in place and the follow-up around investigations, et cetera, that the team is building out is going to put us in a better position to suss out where those pockets are within state agencies where there's repeated issues and significant culture challenge. The culture survey will help with that as well. Particularly as we dig down on survey results, within agencies and divisions of agencies. I think that certainly if as we build this out, if we are finding or if our unions are bringing to our attention, which, they're not hesitant to do, that there are pockets that need additional attention or action taken. Certainly, I would work directly with the agency head to the extent that's feasible, and certainly in coordination with the governor's office and the folks in the governor's office who are responsible for that agency or portfolio. That is our standard operating procedure when there are issues that need to be addressed, and we would work aggressively as we suss out where there may be pockets like you described.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Senator Benz. I see Delegate Harrison has her hand up.
Sorry. Good afternoon or good morning. Thank you for this information. And it's not lost on me that we're dealing with human beings, and but it is quite distressing to even have a conversation about workplace bullying amongst adults and those who are supposed to be professional. My question to you is, considering that we are having this conversation, and as Senator Benson, I think, may have suggested that complaints are numerous and often well, I don't know, but may it be within the same agencies or departments. My question is how much, how often, how readily is it communicated that I just lost the word that I was looking for. A whistleblower. That whistleblowers are protected. They're protected by the law,
Yeah.
so that they would not fear the retaliation. And should there be a whistleblower complaint, and that individual perhaps believes that they have been retaliated against, how long does it take for that person to receive a judgment on that? Because I think that's the other thing that's the problem, is that I think we just saw a report maybe about 2 weeks ago, an individual who had made a complaint. It was a whistleblower complaint, and it took years for them to receive a judgment in their favor. But in the meantime, the stress that individual may have endured is, unacceptable. So
Sure.
how are you relaying that information? How often are you repeating it? Because teaching is repeating until learning takes place, right? So can you answer that, please? Thank you.
Sure, and I'm going to answer it, and I'm going to ask Catherine to correct me if I get this wrong. But my understanding is whistleblower complaints, in particular, my understanding are routed to our state EEO office for investigation. And I do want to confirm with Catherine that I'm getting that right. And there is a process in place within our state EEO office. And there are timelines, which I believe are actually built into statute with regard to investigation and report on the whistleblower complaints. We are actually slated, this committee has asked DBM, along with Nicole Webb, our statewide EEO director, to present at your upcoming December committee meeting on the work of the state EEO office, which includes this portfolio around whistleblower complaints. If it's okay, I'd prefer to defer until Nicole is with us to address your questions. She is our expert on all things related to the whistleblower investigations. But I do want to just confirm with Catherine that I have this right. I believe it's more very much more under our EEO purview than under OPSB, which Catherine leads.
Correct. So the whistleblower law is very specific, and what would sort of comprise a whistleblower complaint is probably something different from complaining about retaliation under the policy. That is actionable. The policy has a very clear prohibition against retaliation. And so if anyone felt they were being retaliated against for filing a bullying complaint, or for participating in the bullying complaint process by being a witness and providing information during an investigation, that is actionable under the bullying policy itself and would be taken very seriously and dealt with.
Just to follow up, just to ensure that I'm just to make sure that I'm understanding well. So an individual who complains about a bullying issue would be basically a separate tract than someone who is considered a whistleblower. So then the bullying tract, if that's correct, let me make sure that's correct. Okay, so then an individual who is complaining about bullying and therefore retaliation, is that process resolved much quicker? Suppose the individual has been terminated or placed on, non-paid administrative leave. How quickly does that individual get a resolution?
I want to make sure I understand the scenario. So the scenario is an individual who in some way or another was involved in a bullying complaint investigation. Either they were the complainant or they were a witness, and they feel they were retaliated against, and retaliation being some type of disciplinary action, I assume, some adverse action
Yes.
happened. Well, the agency, so the employee, him or herself, would have an appeal right of whatever that adverse action is. And that follows the statute. You know, you have 15 days to file an appeal, and there's a process that you go through to get to OAH. But if an employee was saying, I think probably what would happen more frequently is a person feels pressure that they were involved in the investigation. They feel like they're being picked on, maybe. I think that has to go through the process of they would report it to their appointing authority. The appointing authority would be obligated to investigate that very quickly because, again, we have really tight timeframes for imposing discipline. So if an appointing authority did determine that an employee was improperly retaliated against, they have, I think it depends on what the discipline, what they would be wanting to do. 30 calendar days to terminate the person who's involved in retaliating, or up to 5 days to do a suspension, whatever action they might be needing to take. They have a very short runway in order to investigate that allegation and impose appropriate disciplinary action against that alleged bad actor who is retaliating against someone for being involved with the bullying process. I hope that answered your question.
It did. Thank you. Just as I was thinking, and I'm sorry, Mr. and the Chair and Madam Chair, an individual, how often then do you have the statistics on how often an individual who has complained about a bullying situation has been found to be correct within your various departments?
Do you mean how many cases are found to be sustained for bullying?
Yes.
So
yes.
In this year, again, I'm just using this year because to give you it's information from our database. So I think the number was 19% of well, it's not 115 cases. I'm sorry. Let's see. It was
I think it's 17 of the 115
was it 17. I thought it was 19.
were sustained.
But it's below 20%, so it's not as it's nowhere near half. It's under 20% of those cases are determined to be sustained, meaning some form of inappropriate or prohibited conduct under our bullying policy has occurred.
I do want to just clarify though, year to date in 2024, there have been 115 complaints logged in our database. 17 of those have been sustained, but 24 are still pending investigation.
Yes, 74 were unsustained.
And for those individuals who were those individuals who where it was sustained, the individuals who committed the act, the discipline, I'm assuming ranges depending on what it was, because I'm sure that it must be some discipline as it relates to it, whether it's just, retraining or if it's something more serious.
Right. So under the law, we have to do, to perform certain functions under 11106, which requires the appointing authority to meet with the employee. So the alleged bully, meet with them, consider what they have to say, consider their record, and make a decision about what, if any, discipline should happen. And the discipline that I can see in our spreadsheet ranges from retraining, which could probably be some form of very mild type of bullying, if there's such a thing as mild, but not some outrageous bullying, all the way up to and including there have been employees who have been terminated under the policy for bullying. Because absolutely, in this year alone, I don't have the number right off the top of my head, but there are people that have been terminated.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, thank you, Delegate Harrison. This question, I guess, is for the Secretary. Just it's not directly pertaining to the bullying piece, but I think it does pertain to kind of hiring and bringing folks on and retaining people. We've heard from local health officers who are, I guess, the hiring authorities for these local health departments across our state, that they're having difficulty getting their positions filled, that they're having difficulty making appointments to their positions within local health departments. And a lot of this stems from the fact that because it's DBM that categorizes these positions and classifies these positions, that oftentimes they're deprioritized below positions at the Maryland Department of Health because of how they're described or how they're positioned, and maybe just a misunderstanding that a lot of these positions are in local health departments, but kind of equivalent to MDH level positions. Is it possible for us to follow up with you and maybe facilitate a meeting with MACHO, the Maryland Association of
Sure.
County Health Officers, to look at this problem a little bit more?
Absolutely. This is the first time being read into the issue, so it'd be great to learn more.
Okay. And then I guess the last piece that I have here is pertaining to a report that we saw in the Baltimore Banner, I think just came out today, about state hiring and vacancies. Obviously, we're still trying to bring as many folks in, want to retain as many folks. Bullying's a piece of that. What was reported in that story is that state vacancies have been reduced by 22% since January of 2023. But are we able to get more specific numbers
Sure.
when it comes to
Yeah.
this? Because I
Yeah,
know we had a
absolutely.
discussion of this at a joint committee hearing here last year.
Yep, and I think it's slated for December as well.
Okay. If you
Yeah.
could bring
No,
some
we're happy to,
actual
and I think we've been
numbers, that'd be
sharing the
helpful.
data monthly with DLS, so we're happy to share it more broadly if needed.
Yeah, if we could, and we can certainly follow up with DLS too to get some additional numbers. I think last year
Okay.
when for this committee, you said that there may be a dashboard that's being created to better track progress.
We do
Any
use a monthly
update on that?
dashboard.
Okay.
Yeah, we use a monthly dashboard internally to track progress by agency and overall. And this is for the SPMS and MDOT employees. And that is the basis for the data. I believe that was shared with the reporter as well. And I know that for a period of time, we were sharing that data and dashboard monthly with DLS as well. I will make sure that that didn't get interrupted. There have been some staff transitions on both sides. So we'll make sure that they're still getting that monthly too. But yeah, we're happy to share that with the committee ahead of the hearing in December, if that'd be helpful.
Yeah, if you could, and if you could
I
let us know
would-
who the DLS contact is, we can follow up with them as well. I think
Sure. I can't remember
as-
offhand who it is right now. I think it changed over the summers. That's
Yeah.
part of what might be happening.
as you pull together the numbers, it would be helpful to also account for the number of people that are leaving state employment at the same time, right? I think, certainly
Yeah.
we bring folks in, but it's
Oh yeah, that's on our
you
dashboard.
want to look at the net number, right? Not just the folks
Exactly.
coming in, but also folks leaving due to attrition, et cetera, et cetera. And so, I don't know if that
Yes.
22% was accounting for attrition or just 22% of.
It's the net reduction in vacancies, even with the addition of pins. This administration has added thousands of pins since we took office as well. And so even with the addition of pins, the vacancy rate is reduced by, I believe it was 22% on the numbers in front of me that we shared. And so that's net of people leaving.
So you're saying that 22% is net inclusive of attrition, people leaving state employment, and inclusive of new pins or positions that were created or added?
Yeah, I think we're saying the same thing. So improvement of 22% in our vacancy rate. I don't have the numbers in front of me, and I'd be happy to speak to it more specifically the next time we're here. But I believe it was north of 13% in January of 2023. I have 13.4 off my head, but Don't quote me, please, because I don't have it in front of me. And we're down, hovering just below 10% at this point. So that's sort of the reduction that's cited. And those, that vacancy rate is on total pins, total filled positions across all pins. So that's net of people, the churn each month, people leaving and as new people are being hired. And it also is inclusive of the thousands of additional new pins that we've added since we've been in office. So if no pins have been added, the rate may be even higher, even better, the improvement is what we're trying to say.
Yeah, if you could get some precise numbers prior to the next hearing, that would be helpful just to follow up
We're
on
happy to.
the progress that we've been making last year since we discussed this at a prior
Happy
hearing.
to. Yep, happy to. And we'll also make sure DLS is still getting the data each month. It's the analyst who covers DBM and specifically DBM personnel. Share that.
Okay. That sounds good. Any other questions from members of the committee? Okay. Delegate Vitar? Any
I
other
believe,
closing remarks
no.
as a vice chair?
I believe that concludes our agenda for today. Thank you, Secretary and Director. It looks
Sure,
like our
thank you.
next meeting is scheduled for December 11th at 10 a.m. So thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you then. And Chair Lamb, if you have anything else to add.
Nothing else to add. So we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you to the members of the committee who were able to participate today. Thank you, Secretary Grady, and to your team.
Sure. Yeah, we're pleased to be here and look forward to next time. Thanks.
Thanks.